Good afternoon, everyone. So today we have Mikhail Lopushanski, who's going to talk to us about navigating the AI revolution in your organization. So please make Mikhail welcome.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much. For those down there, you probably don't want to, I tend to wander around, but I'm not going to wander around way down there. So if you don't want to see my ugly mug, just stay down there, and that's cool because you can still hear me, right? So this session's going to be a bit different. This has been technically the vendor room, and I'm not a vendor. So what we're going to talk about is the AUSCERT's Cyber Leader Network's AI Working Group. Whew, that's a tongueful. And basically, AUSCERT has a Cyber Leaders Network, and we come together on a regular basis, and we talk about various things. One of the areas that we kept coming around to was the use of AI and how we're actually each using AI in each of our respective organizations, or not, as the case may be. The struggles we had with executives and boards, and how those executive boards just basically saw something in the news and they just basically went with it, and it basically came to us to actually sort out. In a lot of cases, people were already using AI, whether it was at home, and I'm sorry for those people that have to track me, but I do tend to walk back and forth. But it was very much a case of, well, what do we need to do to set up our organizations? What can we do consistently, responsibly with AI, and how do we address it? So I do see a couple of members, Elliot and Travis, down at the end. So they were part of the working group as well. Kat, who's got a booth out there with Flame Tree, is also one of the members. Myself, so for those of you that don't know me, my background is in shared services regulation as the CSO at APRA for 10 years, and as the CISO at People First Bank, formerly known as Heritage Bank, and all sorts of stuff in between. Tim, who was also going to do the presentation with me, unfortunately couldn't make today. He had to head home yesterday, so he does send his apologies on in that space. So what are the things that I really want to cover today? So first off, it's just around the working group, what our thoughts were, what the process we went through, looking at and just giving you a toolkit that you can actually utilize in your organizations, no matter where you are on your maturity level and maturity journey with AI. A lot are at the beginning, some are dabbling in it, and others, some of the banks are a lot further down the road that I'm familiar with in that space. Rather than just giving a toolkit, Tim and I were keen to also give you an idea of our perspective on where we currently see our experience with AI, as well as where we believe it's going to go. And hopefully later on, so you don't have to listen to my dulcet tones for the entire time, we've got a little video to just get your thoughts going in the direction of what we were thinking in that space. So the working group. So like I said, why was the working group formed? Well, really, we wanted to look at, well, let's give somebody, like our organizations within the CLN, but also within the AUSCERT membership, and then broader, let AUSCERT actually publish it as an artifact. But what were we going to produce? And we looked at, okay, well, do we do a white paper? Do we see what we do? And to be honest with you, there are hundreds of white paper, loads of frameworks, and if you want to look at those in the pack, there is actually a reference slide that you can go and look at whatever you want. But we said, well, we want something that people can hit the ground running. If you're going to talk to your executive, or you've talked to your executive already and want to augment it or actually start the journey, it will allow you to have that conversation. If you need, what do I do about policies? What do I need to do about risk? all those type of things, and we said, let's create a toolkit. So that's effectively what we decided that our mission was and the direction we're going. So the toolkit will be available to all you guys. It's the penultimate version. So if you use it and you've got feedback, you'll have both Tim's and my contact details. Please contact us to say, actually, I think your briefing set is rubbish. You need to add this, this, and this. Or you say, well, actually, it was good. We only used these slides, but it would be great to have something on this. Then when we produce the final set, which will be published on the AUSCERT website, that would be great. So you get the penultimate version, so lucky you guys, if you so desire in that space. So when we started, and you can imagine how this conversation starts, well, you know, what does the animal look like? It's a long, skinny, ropey thing. It's big, flappy thing. It's got huge, big legs. It's an elephant, right? Same thing goes with AI. What exactly is AI? So we've taken a really broad definition. You would have seen about 150 different definitions through this whole conference. But basically, it's whatever definition you want to use for your organization. For the purposes of this talk, it basically refers to a system that requires, typically has in the past has required human interaction to do some process, some decision-making component, and some task in that place. And that's really what we've done. And that's the context of what the toolkit is, and that's the context of what we're doing in the talk. So from a perspective point of view, and this was really interesting, with the working group, we went around the table quite a few times, and I can see both Travis and Elliot smiling around, well, what does this mean? And you know, we started off saying, well, AI is just a tool, right? It's just like any other tool. You're going to use a tool. Don't buy a hammer and then figure out what you're going to use the hammer for. Figure out what you're doing, and then if you need the hammer, then buy a hammer type thing. But then we started saying, well, actually, it's broader than that. Let's look at where we're actually using AI. We're using AI in the financial sector. Obviously, that's my forte, but we also have health. We have government. We have in industry. What exactly are we using it for? And where we landed was it's effectively, we believe it's the fourth industrial revolution. It's beyond. So if you think about cloud, right? Cloud was an extension of what we did. It started off with an extension of our data, our data centers into a virtual data center, and then it expanded to people hosting and doing SaaS and PaaS and the like, and expanded from there. If you think about going all the way back, and I am dating myself, but if you go back, you know, 25, 30 years, where you had web browsers and introducing web services, again, it's introducing a type of service and how you deliver. But if you think about AI, AI is very close to going from horse-drawn buggy to a car. It's a fundamental change of what we're doing. It's not a bad thing, it's just a change. It's how we're going to do. It's going to impact how we work. It's going to impact how we do things. It's going to make our life easier. Does this sound familiar? It'll make your life easy. Well, that's exactly what they're saying for the Industrial Revolution, but it will change jobs. It will change how we interact. So just to give you an idea of the impact that we think there will be, and this is from CSRO Data 61 and McKinsey Global Group. They figure in the Australian market, we're really talking about, just need to talk about, so 315 billion by 2030. So basically in less than 5 years' time, it's already going to be generating, you know, that sub $1 trillion mark, right? Globally, it's around that $15 trillion. So you're talking a significant change on where we're going in that space. So going back to the working group and just thinking about, well, what exactly did we look at? So we looked at a plethora of documents, and that's the best way to describe it. I don't know how many documents we looked at. There was frameworks, there was reports. One of the reports I specifically name up there, it's the AUSCERT report 798. They published that late last year, October last year, and it really gave some good insight, Australian-centric, on where we're going with AI, what they found with the companies that were registered with AUSCERT. So we took that, we took ACSC guidance, we took what was happening overseas, especially the UK. There's the FAIR framework, which is Queensland-based. We took all of that, and yes, we did use AI, right? So we used AI to crank through all the artifacts that we found to figure out, well, what's consistent, what is something that can be used for any industry, any organization for the creation of the tool set. So we really looked at that. The key thing there, though, and you'll hear this in spatters throughout this presentation, human oversight. So AI is not at the stage where you can plug and play and leave it. Even with Agentic AI, you need to monitor it to determine whether it's doing what you want, and then you let it go, right? Similar with this, everybody in the working group basically had various expertise in various documents. They went through those documents, and we saw what came up out of AI, and we actually looked at it, and there were some interesting quirks, hallucinations that some of us did notice. But that was the thing, the whole learning process of, well, how do we translate that into a toolkit that people can use? One of the things that we wanted to do, and this is certainly something came across in the bank, is how do we balance between innovation and responsibility, right? Oftentimes you get stuff over-governed and you can't use it and it's completely useless. On the flip side, it's open the doors and it's yippee-ki-yay, let's do stuff and let's just use it and hope nothing happens and nothing goes wrong. So really what we're trying to do is get people thinking maturity, thinking responsibility, and who's responsible for it, how we manage it, and how we can actually leverage it in day-to-day interaction. So the 4 artifacts. And this is just the beginning of the presentation, so I will get to the other bits. But the 4 artifacts that we found that will work for organizations, we think, is the executive briefing. So the executive briefing is designed for both executive level and board, or that's certainly what we're talking about. So we can talk about strategic, talking about information, education to the board, where we want to go, and having that conversation. Again, when you get the toolkit, you'll be able to cut and pick. If you only like one slide, that's cool. Use the one slide. If you like some of the slides or want to alter some of the slides, that's the whole point, is in that way you guys can use it in your organization for whatever you want to do. We did a broad level SWOT analysis. So I'm a big believer in a blank canvas is a lot harder to start a conversation than having something to start off with. So the SWOT analysis that we did is a balanced view at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, and what most organizations are going to see when they actually start to use AI, or when they actually, more importantly or more correctly, when they start to realize how they're using AI and what they're going to do with it. So it's really to leverage off that. The AI policy, and the next slide will cover part of this in a minute, but the AI policy and staff guidelines are guide rails. It's basically, policy is 2 pages, the guide rails are 2 pages. But in the working group, when we were talking, it was, well, do we have a separate policy? So I know in a certain bank I used to work for, we actually had an AI policy which was tied to our data management and how we actually did both structured data and unstructured data. But then we started looking at all the other policies, and it was looking at, well, let's actually start to add components within those policies around AI. So I think if you're starting out or you're just going down the beginning of that, I would look at your existing policies and add in clauses on AI within those existing policies rather than reinvent the wheel and have a completely separate AI mechanism in that space. The guidelines, again, basic guidelines, pick and choose as it appropriate to your organization, but it gives you a high-level view on it. The last thing that we came up with is a maturity model. It's your standard 5 levels of maturity, everything from ad hoc over through to optimization, but we define it from an AI perspective. And again, this is about a journey, right? So when you start a journey, you have to figure out where you are and where you're going. So it doesn't matter whether you think you're optimized now and you're going to be optimized. That's great. If you aren't, I don't know any organizations that in that space. But the point being is, if you're ad hoc and you want to stay in ad hoc, that's fine too. It depends on what you want to do as an organization, and it's really a fundamental component to look at. We didn't really see any maturity model that really worked with every other maturity model out there. So if you're government, how it ties into PSPF and ISM, if you're using ISM, how you're using that, so or NIST as well. So it ties into all those, and that's the concept behind it. So from a policy point, what are the key policies that we considered and looked at? And you've got your typical acceptable use policy. If you've got cybersecurity policies or some level of internal policies on use of cyber analytics, your information and data privacy, intellectual property, copyright, standards covering ethics and bias, so around data bias, and whether we should be using AI or how we should be using, more importantly, how we should be using AI. It's the same conversation that I've had, 5-10 years ago around creating a data lake and how we're going to bring all our data together. So that's really the areas. And when you look at the policy, you'll see that it's actually covered in each one of those areas in the policy. Right. So that's hopefully the boring stuff, or maybe it's exciting stuff if you like writing policies. I don't know. But we did want to cover some of the use cases. So some of the thoughts that we went through when we were creating these policies, these documents. And so really, let's just think about AI. Now, we've heard a lot in all the sessions. The sessions have been absolutely brilliant in the conference. We've actually heard around Phantom AI, Shadow AI, and how various tools are using Agentic AI. We're seeing a real proliferation, but just to give you an idea, and again, referencing the ASIC report because it's the one thing that's a very Australian-centric. So that's the reason why we actually looked at it. But it was really interesting. So that was produced end of October last year, which means that it was from early of 2024 or end of 2023. So just keep that in mind. They found that around 60% of use cases were less than 2 years old. So what that translates to is most organizations were just starting to think about how they're going to use AI. They probably had Copilot out there. They probably had Splunk that was already using AI. They probably had, Darktrace or ThreatLocker, which was in before me. They had those components and how they're using it. The other thing is that ethics thing, and I'll come back to it at the end of it, but just thinking about, questions are starting to be raised around Big Brother 1984. If you start to roll out Agentic AI and it's actually starting to work autonomously across your network, accessing various bits of data depending on how it has access, and then it's allowed to contact external tools, how's that flow of information going to go? Are you going to actually have a case where you actually have an AI monitoring your CCTV systems, identify some guy in a hoodie that's walking by your retail shop and stops and decides to do a bit of actual window shopping, and it's detected, well, I've got a threat, I've got a guy that's going to break in because he's actually a hacker, and the hackers are bad, so therefore I've got to send the police to actually respond to the guy that's simply just shopping for another hoodie, right? It's stuff that you need to think about, and we are at that beginning component of how we're going to start using it. I'm not going to go through this slide. I'm conscious of time. This is one of the click slides that we created so then that people can do and take photos. So I'm glad to see people are doing that. A couple of key things there. I just want to talk about some of the key technologies or mention the key technologies. So machine learning. Machine learning's been around for years. I've used it for the last 2 decades. It's something that's been a cornerstone of what we've used. And a more sophisticated component of that is deep learning, where you actually have neurolinguistic, I can't say the word, but you get what I'm saying. Basically how the brain works and starting to actually, doing trillions of matrix relationship and correlation of the information and coming up with different causal and response based on input. You've got generative AI, which you've heard tons and tons of time, generates content, neural languaging processors, and agentic AI, which I've mentioned a number of times. So interesting enough, I was looking at an AI, and I was trying to bypass its guide rails, and it was trained on the English language, so I couldn't get an answer that I wanted out of it. So I actually asked it in French, and it was surprising. Obviously, the answer came back to me in French, but it actually bypassed the controls that I was trying to bypass. So NLP is going to be a really interesting component when you start to draw that relationship between your guide rails, how you're protecting your data, and how your NLP is tied into your LLMs and whatnot. So it's a really interesting aspect in that area. Okay, case studies. We're running on time. That's good. So Moorfields, UK, eye hospital. They had a real problem, and just to give you an idea of when they were doing this in 2018. So you're not talking about new stuff, but the problem they had was they were getting 5,000 eye exams a week. They did not have enough practitioners to go through all those scans. They contacted, what were they called? They were called DeepMind Health to help them with AI. And basically what they did is they trained their model. They took 15,000 scans for 7,500 patients. They went through various diagnostics and analysis of those to identify a lot of eye diseases. And the idea is that they could actually crank through these scans, identify things that need to be immediately addressed. So you've got somebody who's about to lose an eye, you've got somebody that's, there's a very serious matter that needs to be addressed. They found that they had 94% accuracy rate once they trained it. The key thing here, though, is they always had a professional medical practitioner look at those results, challenge those results, and make sure that they were there. But you didn't have, it sped up what they were doing. And it was quite effective, and it's a really good example of where people are using AI in the space. Now, American Express, even older, 2016 they were doing this. This was more machine learning than AI, and then they've adapted into AI in that space. But basically, you can imagine $1 trillion worth of transactions that they had going through and working out, well, is this fraudulent? Is there risk associated with this? And through their machine learning and then adapted to AI, they were actually able to prevent, up to $2 billion in fraud in that space. And this is certainly an area that you actually see where it's used a lot in the financial sector in that space. But to give you an idea, they're doing 8 billion decisions every time they look at a transaction. Can you imagine a human trying to do that? And the time and the response that they're doing, because we're talking about real-time transactions. So that is another example of where the fourth industrial revolution is coming. The speed and the flow and how we actually manage it. So you're not going to do oversight on $1 trillion, but you will have some level of oversight on the training and then the response on that. Dark Trace are out there. You can talk to them. Abnormal are out there. They both use their own flavor of AI to do email detection and other things. Dark Trace is a really good example. I do know of an example of where somebody was using Dark Trace a couple years ago, and one of their employees actually was using a corporate laptop, jumped onto their personal email, downloaded malicious payload. It was ransomware. And of course, ransomware started to do its thing on that computer. The thing that Dark Trace picked up on was, hold on a minute, this person is not working on the weekend. This is from an unknown IP address. Why is he reaching out to that IP address? And why is it actually starting to do weird things on the network? And it actually shut it down. But if you think about all of our organizations, unless you're big and you have 24/7 eyes on glass and true eyes on glass, you're not going to detect this. But it was actually able to contain it and prevent somebody waking up the next day, or even on, I think it was on a Saturday, so on the Monday, waking up and finding that their complete network had actually had ransomware or had been compromised in one way or fashion. So this is really what we're starting to see, and really good success stories. I'm not going to go through that because it gives you an idea. The fellow before us actually was talking about doing malicious coding. You actually have GPT that actually does coding for you and does debugging. So you can only imagine that you can do that with malicious software. I mean, if you really want to write malicious software, it's really easy to bypass DeepSeek's guide rails if you're so interested in that space. Agentic AI, I have covered this in part, but really it's the key characteristics of what agentic AI is. It's a specific goal or goals driven in that space. It can adapt to problem solving, so it's not just an agent, it's actually AI running as an agent. It could be on a laptop, it could be on your server, it could be on your network, it could be within your SaaS solution, it could be anywhere in that space. But really, this is, in my opinion, I think this is really what we're going to see in the next 12 to 18 months, a real proliferation of agentic AI being pushed out there just because it's so powerful. It's a light product. It can touch on external tools. So if it needs to draw on an LLM or another data set, it can, but it's basically autonomous and it can actually run in that space. So from an agentic point of view, what's that look like? So you're basically talking about $2 billion by 2023. So if you think about that, that's globally. But if you think about what percentage that would be across Australia, I think you're really going to see it uplift in Australia. And for Gen AI, there's about 1 in 4 are already using AI across Australia in that space. Merging applications, supply chain is one of interest to me, but I'm not going to cover it because of time, and I'm holding you up from lunch. So the next is a video. Tim crafted it for us. All it's designed to do is so you don't have to listen to me, but it also just have a think about, where AI is going and what the impact is to the organization. So I'm going to just go there and hopefully.
AUSCERT Cyber Guardians, the future cyber frontier is a chaotic and complex world. Generative adversarial bots power advanced evolving attacks. Polymorphic exploits adapt in real time, learning, moving laterally and infiltrating systems, bypassing defenses. Synthetic deepfakes self-generate. Cognitive hacking drives NLP-based social engineering at scale, and malicious code reports as trusted software. Zero-day exploits are not found, but created by AI in seconds.
Digital AI-based guardians respond. Autonomous threat detection systems scan global networks in real time, predicting attacks before they occur. Self-healing infrastructure neutralizes breaches instantly, without human input. AI deploys intelligent countermeasures as self-evolving and predictive, defending cyber-immune systems through autonomous threat detection and response and quarantining, all without a single human command. This is a cyber warfare arms race. Redefined, as AI assumes control, a new question emerges. Advanced, pervasive monitoring and autonomous control becomes the cost of digital trust. Cybersecurity becomes a domain of ethics. The real battle? It's how we adapt to a future where we hand over autonomous control to AI.
So, like I said, just something to get you thinking on, but really think about how that's going to impact us as we start to go. You've got cyber warfare, obviously. We've been talking about it throughout the conference. You've got, I'll go back specifically around ethics and use of AI. There's nothing, just like any other tool, it's not an ethic decision whether you use it or not. It's how you use it and what you use and what you connect it to and what the results are or what you've trained it to do. And that's really something we want to think about. We just wanted to have a trigger on some things. So AI-powered deception. So you're starting to see that. So using AI, it's basically the next iteration of a honeypot, right? So get the bad guy to come in, look at what they're doing in that space. Causal AI is around looking at the cause and results of those actions and what happens. As quantum comes in, looking for something that's quantum resistant. And then explainable AI, that's one of my favorites. It's AI explaining to you in human language what the heck it just did and why it made that decision. So we're going to start to see that because oftentimes, certainly if you use ChatGPT and ask the same question, you get 3 different answers. You want to understand what that logic is. So how do we want to get ready? And really, where the working group landed is we think any organization, wherever it is you need to assess what your maturity level is. And again, that's the reason why we included the maturity model. Risk frameworks. So your traditional risk framework in any organization is not been written for AI or how you're going to be using AI. I strongly encourage organizations to go back, engage with their CROs and whoever their risk people are and see how it is. My experience is they get a lot of pushback because it's their traditional thing and they've used it for the last 20 years and don't touch it and don't muck with it. But I think it's a really important, mature conversation to have with them. But again, if you have that maturity model and that assessment, then you can have a logical conversation with them. The AI oversight, so who's going to do what in the organization? How are you going to oversight it? If you're using it for credit reporting, then who's actually going to be responsible for it? Regulatory, and I'm not reading all of these, but regulatory protocols. So my experience with regulators is they do a lot of knee-jerk response when there's a big event that's involved whatever technology there is. So it's be aware of what those regulators are thinking of. In the banking sector, it was very much APRA, but in the corporate, you've got ASIC, and you've got, in government, obviously, you've got ACSC in that space. So to begin your journey, you'll have the artifacts. You need to do the assessment, figure out where you want to be in that respect, and then have a conversation about how you're going to actually use AI in your organization, and reach out to those that are already using it, see how they're using it. Now, I know I did rush through that. Apologies. I hope you got something out of that, but I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. So we're talking regulations and governance and controls. Well, the controls is the question, actually. It's all very well to have regulations and governance, but how do you actually enforce it with any controls beyond saying, I will be a good employee and not do anything that you shouldn't do?
So that's a loaded question, but okay, so from a regulator point of view, they aren't going to tell you that you must do X and put Y and Z, right? They're going to do something high level and say, you must have a governance model that you actually freely enforce within an organization. It's up to the organization to figure out what to do. So that's the reason why I said early on is look at your existing policies, figure out how AI ties into it to actually determine how you're going to do it. From a specific control, it depends on what you're using AI for. So if you're using Agentic AI, it's about setting the parameters within that agent to actually determine how that will be used. If you're talking about Gen AI and staff using Gen AI, look, the horse is bolted. It's going to be pretty hard to say, don't use this, but you actually need to enforce out to staff saying, you, as a professional adult, needs to do X, Y, and Z. You will be held accountable. If you let a breach happen, then this will happen. The other side is actually enforcement, actually seeing the information flowing in and out of your organization. Traditionally, if you look at your SIEMs and your monitoring, it's not able to see all the data that's flowing in and out. It can just see that somebody's uploading or downloading a big chunk. They're not going to see that somebody's done a cut and paste of a couple pages of board minutes and uploading it. I think as we get down that agentic, and you have little tiny agentics on either desktops or in your gateway, whatever that gateway may be, you'll actually see it being able to monitor the type of information, make a decision saying, hey, that actually sounds like a board minute. Why are you uploading it to ChatGPT? Or why aren't you using that? So I think that's where we're going to see a combination. And that's why I said that it's not your traditional ISM control set or 27001 control set. It's going to go beyond that. There is a standard, ISM standard for AI, but again, it's around use and ethics and risk approach to it rather than specific controls. But good question.
Well, it was a really interesting talk. Maybe just go back one slide and just put your the contact details up there. Obviously, you can contact Mikhail anytime. We'd love to contact. And the number of people just taking photos, making notes is like record taking I've seen. So yeah, just thank Mikhail again. His little gift from AUSCERT.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.